So I have had a video for making a dog collar on my YouTube channel for a while, and now we're going to make a leash. So last night I made a new collar for my dog, and I followed the directions that are on my video, but I pieced the fabric, I guess, together a little bit differently because it's half vinyl and half webbing. So I cut the vinyl 2 inches wide and folded both long raw edges into the center, and then I put a piece of seatbelt webbing on the back. So that's how we're going to be making this leash today. You could also make the leash using the method that I use in the collar tutorial, where the webbing is inside and then you have fabric folded around it so you don't see any of the webbing on the outside. Mine is going to be double-sided like that. So this is the method I used to make the collar. So first I cut my vinyl the full length. Let's see, it's 45 plus 8, so this is 53 inches long, and then I cut another strip that is 25 inches long, and the reason I cut 2 was because I wanted to make it longer than I actually wanted the leash to be, because it's going to wrap around to make the handle also. So right now I'm going to place these wrong sides together so that we can make it one long continuous piece of vinyl. And I cut this vinyl 2 inches wide. And you could do the same thing with fabric also. I'm going to use a couple of clips. I'm going to sew from this corner to this corner. Yes, and that will make it one long continuous piece with a seam. And the reason we do it diagonally is because then the pressure along that seam is evenly distributed and not going straight across where it would break easily. Plus, with having the webbing backing the vinyl, even if the vinyl were to be stressed where it would break, the seatbelt webbing is very strong and will not break. Oh, I shouldn't use this pen. I got it everywhere. Don't use a regular old gel pen to draw your line, which I'll discuss in a minute, the line. Okay, so now I'm going to open these triangles up of where it was sewn together, and I'm just going to top stitch along both sides of that, and that just helps it to lay down nicely. And when I top stitch, I use about a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And you can do this on a domestic sewing machine as well. You don't need an industrial machine. Okay. And now I'll top stitch on the other side. Alright, and now we can cut off this additional bit. Alright, so I'm just going to trim away the excess. Make sure that you don't cut through the long piece of vinyl at all. Alright, so now I've drawn a line directly down the center of the back that's 1 inch in from each edge, so it's right in the middle. And I'm going to use double-sided tape. If you had wider, like a 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch wide tape, you could just put a line directly down the center and you'd be able to fold both of the raw edges into that. I don't, so I'm just going to put a line of this down each side of the line that I marked. If you're using fabric, you could iron this. If you want to use fabric clips, you can do that, but I feel like using double-sided tape makes it much easier to sew with vinyl. You could do the same method with cork or leather if your sewing machine would handle it. Maybe a thinner leather, but I would definitely back leather, like a thin leather, I would definitely back it with webbing still so that it won't break. So I'm going to have such a mess to clean up with this ink. So I used like an Energel gel pen to draw the line since it didn't matter what it was, and it's just smearing everywhere. And this doesn't have to be like completely straight, just as long as it's near the center and on one side of the line. All right, and then if you're familiar with my Midnight Kiss pouch, I'm also going to make a little doggy waist bag holder with that pattern to clip to the leash, but that'll be a separate video. All right, so we have that on one side of the line, so I'm going to peel back the paper and just start pressing the raw edge into the marked line and pushing it down on that tape. And it's helpful to only pull back part of the paper off of the tape at a time so that everything's not just sticking to each other or sticking to itself. So I think I'll just speed this up. You can see what I'm doing, folding it to the line and pressing it down onto the tape. And then I'll repeat that on the other side of the line with the other side of the vinyl. Once the whole strap is folded and taped or clipped, if you're using clips, we're going to tape it now to the webbing. So I did place a couple of clips here where the seam is, joining those two pieces of vinyl together, just because it was pretty thick and it was kind of unfolding. So I have here 1-inch wide seatbelt webbing that I bought from Wizardry Stitchery. When you're using seatbelt webbing or any polyester or nylon, I think polypropylene webbing is what I used in my last video, and the edges are going to be raw, they will unravel. So as you see how easily that unravels. So what you need to do is use a lighter or another heat sealing method with caution. Be careful not to burn yourself. Don't burn your house down. Just to heat seal the ends like this. So it melts it just enough so that it won't unravel anymore. Alternatively, you can also use something like Dritz Fray Check, and you would just place this on the end and it will help to stop that from fraying. So this webbing is from Wizardry Stitchery, which I'll link in the video description below. And you could either clip it onto the back, you could just kind of hold it in place probably as you sew. I'm going to use tape. So this one is a 1/4 inch wide tape. I just didn't have that much of it, so I didn't want to use that for all of the steps because I don't know if I'd have enough. And I'm just going to place one line of this directly down the back of my vinyl, right along the center line. If you're using fabric, you definitely can probably skip most of the tape because you could pin it You could use clips. I think it's still helpful to use tape for this part, but you would be able to iron fabric, so the creases in the first step would stay in place without using tape because you can press it. You cannot iron vinyl from the right side like this, it would melt. And I'm using, this vinyl is very thin, so that makes it more flexible. If it was a really thick vinyl, I don't think it would work out well for this because it would be too stiff. So it needs to be a nice flexible vinyl if you want to do this. All right, now I'm going to pull away the paper along a portion of this and start at the one end. You'll notice when you fold the vinyl, because of the thickness, if you meet the edges in the center, the webbing is just slightly wider than the vinyl. And I actually like it. I like that look. If you don't want the webbing to be slightly wider than the vinyl, then you'll want to not fold that vinyl all the way into the center line, but leave a small gap between where the two pieces meet. And I'm not cutting the webbing until it's all the way adhered to the vinyl. And that way it's one less thing to measure. And you can make this as long as you want, obviously. You can make it shorter if you want it to be shorter. If you're using fabric instead of vinyl, vinyl can be left raw edged because it won't fray. If you're using fabric for this top piece, you would want to fold the ends under when you press it by like 1/2 inch or so that you don't have a raw edge at the end of your fabric piece. So if you watch the dog collar tutorial that I have, I use fabric for that, and I fold the edges under. So if you don't understand what I mean by that, you could watch that video and see. The 1/8 inch double-sided tape that I used on the vinyl piece was from Wizardry Stitchery, and this 1/4 inch double-sided tape that I'm using is from Tandy Leather, and it's called leather tape, I believe. Double-sided leather tape. I will link both in the comments, and then they also have wider, like 3/8 inch wide tape. I think both places have that, which if you use that, then you could not have to put so many rows of tape down here. Okay, so when I get to the end, I'm going to trim my webbing off. All right, and then I'm going to heat seal this end of the webbing as well. You can pull it away from the vinyl a little bit so that you don't melt your vinyl. Just allow the edge to melt nicely and then kind of stick it back down to the vinyl. Okay, so first we need to sew. We need to sew this together. So this is really a simple project. Probably takes me the longest to tape it. So I'm just going to start here on one short end, and I'm going to sew across. Everything I'm using here is a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to sew across that short edge. and I'm back stitching there. And then I'll turn and use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So all the way down the long edge. It helps to just kind of throw the rest of the leash over your shoulder. I have the seam guide tape that I use that is from, it's called Sew Friction. It's probably Sew Fraction from Sewful Therapy. So I'll link that also below. And this ruler sticker that I have here is also from Sewful Therapy. Okay, stop when you get about 1/8 of an inch from the other end. Turn, so across the short end. You want to make sure that you start this with a full bobbin. And then we're going to sew down this long edge, also using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. The sewing machine that I'm using is a Juki DU1181N. It's a walking foot machine. You definitely don't need an industrial sewing machine to make this, but this is just my normal machine that I use as a bag maker. And the thread that I'm using is Tech 70 from Size Swag Bags. I have a size 19 needle here, I think. And this thread is polyester, which I would recommend using polyester or nylon thread since it's stronger. Cotton thread will break easier. So after you sew all of that, all right, now I'm going to take a 1-inch swivel clip. You'll want to make sure, since this is going to be holding the dog, so especially if you have a big dog that can pull hard, you want to make sure that you're using like a nice, strong, heavy-duty clip. These are sold for bag making, so I don't know if it's necessarily strong enough. These seem to be strong. These are from moremeknow.com. So that's what I'm going to be using right now. You could also look at Strapworks. Check strapworks.com. They have different weights of hardware. So they have heavy duty swivel clips, and if you have like a big dog that is going to pull hard, you may want to try that. So I'm folding about 1.5 inches of vinyl toward the back with my clip in the fold. And now I'm going to sew across here as close to the hardware as I can get. I'm going to sew a box. And after that, I'm going to sew an X inside the box, and this just will secure, make this stronger. Yeah. So I backstitched across the first line as close to the hardware as I can get. Now I'm sewing down the edge along my initial stitching line. I'm going to sew across the bottom, also along the line where I sewed before. And then sew back up the other side along the same stitching line. When I get back to that first line, then I'm going to rotate it and sew from one corner to the other corner. And then I'm going to sew back across that first line, or the bottom line. Rotate one more time and sew from that bottom corner up to this top corner of the box. And I'll try to show a close-up of this. And I just backstitch to secure my stitches in place. Alright, so if you look up close, you can see there's a box and then an X sewn through the center of it. So that's what you want. All right, so that's the end that will clip to the dog collar. The other end we need to make a handle. So we're just going to, let's see, how big do I want my handle to be? Big enough to put on my wrist, but not huge. So I'm going to fold about 8 inches of the vinyl toward the back. I'm going to measure from this edge, I think only about 1 inch up. I want to put a, actually, I'll go ahead and slide it on now. I have a 1 inch wide D-ring that I'm going to put right here so that I can clip the little bag right to the leash that will hold the dog waste bags. So I'm just going to, if you want your handle bigger, you can make it any size you want. I'm just going to sew across the edge here. And backstitch a few times. I really only backstitched once. Stitch across, backstitch, and then stitch across again. Alright, and then I'm going to slide this ring all the way down. If you want it to be on the other side, you could put it there. I think I might. It looks cute on that side. And now we're going to just sew across above that D-ring. So just as close as you can get. I left my regular foot on, so it's a little bit further away, maybe a whole inch away from the first stitching, and that's fine. Okay, we're just going to sew straight across that, back stitch all the way across, sew all the way across again, and now I'm going to sew a box just so there's some extra stitching here, holding everything together. And then I'll put an X in the center of this box as well. Alright, so that is literally it. So we have a whole dog leash. And this can be clipped onto the collar. And she's going to look super fancy. If you enjoyed that video, go ahead and make sure you follow my page. Make sure you give it a like. Visit my Facebook group, and you can share your leashes there. You can see all of my sewing patterns. Just join a great community. Thanks for watching.